Okay, and I think it's on, so let's start the subject. Getting started with Arcade. So we have a meetup soon called Attribute Rules, more about attribute rules for parcel fabrics, and we realize that many of you don't know Arcade well enough to understand some of the things we might do there, and I think one of you proposed we do a Getting Started with Arcade as part of the meetup. So here we are, and the attendance is pretty, and the registration is pretty high. So we hope not to screw up too much. Who is the target audience for today's, which is kind of a beginners with Arcade? It's anyone that wants to either get started with Arcade. It's anyone that wants to understand what is Arcade. Maybe you're a manager, you're never going to touch the scripting language, but you want to understand what it is. And I think both communities, whether you're going to use it or you're a manager level, you want to know what you can do with it, which is more interesting, of course. And it's totally okay not to have any programming experience whatsoever for this session. So unlike SDK session or Python sessions where we expect people to know some kind of programming, some level, entry-level programming experience, for today, you don't need any of those. So feel comfortable. Now, big motivation for Arcade for Parcels was attribute rules, and this was recognized in the holistic testing event we had in September 2018. And I know this picture in today's reality looks a bit weird, so I have a picture where you can easily identify yourself more easily if you're part of that group, and that looks much more safe, of course. So everybody wanted to know about attribute rules. That was a hit, and therefore, of course, we are leveraging that technology that keeps growing with us. And today's, so it's pretty frustrating to sit here in another part of the world to speak to a microphone, not getting any reaction. So Jason and Amy volunteered to be 2 students, so they'll give me feedback if I forget something, and they'll actually do the exercises. But we also want you to be hands-on today and open your web browser. If you have ArcGIS Pro, open it with some parcel data. It doesn't need to be even a parcel fabric. It could be even coming from a shapefile. As long as you have a few polygons, it's good enough. And we'll actually give you some time to practice yourself a minute or 2 with every exercise as we go forward. Now, if you miss something, don't get stressed out, because everything we're going to share in a recording later. We're also going to share all the answers, so the cheat sheet. So you'll have a reference for that. And there's another presentation, like you know, in 2 weeks from now, in January 20, where we're going to go and deep dive into more Arcade rules and a bit more advanced level. So it's pretty laid back. And the meetup in general is always less formal, more laid back, less scripted. It's not a user conference session. So what is Arcade? For those that have no idea, there's one sentence: a portable, lightweight, and secure expression language. That's what you need to know. And if you know Excel spreadsheets and you have those functions where you can put in a cell, it's very similar to that. The idea is you take one or more inputs, you do some transformation to it, and you provide a single output, like you see in a cell in an Excel spreadsheet. It's not meant to be a full programming language, scripting language like Python or .NET, which can return multiple feature classes, multiple fields, multiple things, and do a lot more. So it's very compact, it's very lightweight, and it's also not going to replace the geoprocessing automation. We have Python and geoprocessing models for that. So it's really meant to do something simple and quick in different areas of the software. So when this concept, when this new framework was introduced, my first reaction was, why do we need this new language? Didn't we have enough AML and then Avenue in ArcView? Now we need to invent another language. What's wrong with Python, with JavaScript, with .NET? So here are the reasons for this language. First, it has to be portable. So you write an expression in ArcGIS Pro, potentially it can work on a web browser or on a mobile runtime. So it needs to work across multiple clients. Another thing, it's going to be needs to be lightweight. So that eliminates Python because nobody is going to install Python on their mobile device. So that's not going to work. It has to be secure. So that eliminates both Python and JavaScript because there's security vulnerabilities there that we want to avoid. And another reason, and important one, it has to be geospatial. So it has GIS methods that we use that give us access to the feature, to their geometry, to their spatial reference, to the map, to the layer, to things that are GIS. And the advantage, especially with service-oriented architecture, is that you can write something once in your desktop environment, but know that it's going to run just the same in a web environment or mobile. And that can be a label that returns a string. It's going to return the same string. It could be a pop-up expression. It could be an attribute rule. It could be many other things. So that's another motivation to invest and know Arcade and not use Python, which will, of course, fail to run in a web browser, for example. Where can I use Arcade? So there's many areas in the software today that use Arcade as an expression language. One of them, and we'll see some of those today, is visualization, the Symbology pane. And we use it in the Parcel Fabric already. If you look in the Symbology for parcels, you'll see that there's a seed and a parcel symbology, there's Kogo lines, there's point symbology. They all rely on Arcade expression. We use them for attribute rules. Some of those attribute rules are already implemented as part of creating a new Parcel Fabric. Some can be imported in as attribute rules. Field calculation gives you a few options: Python, Arcade, maybe still VBScript if you're on older versions, and you can use Arcade for that. And it in some places it has advantages over Python as well, but it's easier, more simpler to learn. Labeling is another place, and this is the first thing we implemented for parcels was the labeling expression, and we use it for all our labeling for parcel name and acreage, and as well as the Kogo lines, etc. Popups is another thing. It could be a pop-up on the web, pop-up in Pro. It's what we used to call identify window, right? And you can create your own entries, so they don't have to even exist as a field. It's just another thing you create, and it appears in the list like fields. A display expressions. So, for example, instead of showing object IDs for lines you just Kogoed, it can show actually the distance and direction or curve parameters, which are more meaningful, and so on. Each of those areas are called profiles. Okay, so you will see this, and the importance of understanding profiles is that there could be differences in the methods that you use. And to explain that is, for example, text formatting makes sense for labeling, right? You want to have a bold, underlined, big font, specific font, and so on. But of course, it doesn't make sense to have text formatting for attribute rules that calculate a value. So these different profiles have access to different things. Another example is access to the map, which makes no sense if you're working in a geodatabase level on a table. That table can be exposed in multiple maps. So of course, a map is something that is only known to something like a pop-up or a label, but it's unknown to something like an attribute rule that sits on a geodatabase level. And there are currently about 14 profiles, and that list keeps on growing, and that's another, of course, motivation to know Arcade, because you can use it across all of those areas. It works the same, very similar. Now, the first thing I would like you to do is, I hope you have two windows, is to open your web browser and go to this URL. It's also in the chat box, and we are going to the Arcade Playground. We're going to play with that. And this is the area where you can find the function reference and support for Arcade. And I'm going to do the same here on my side. So let's open the Arcade Playground, and then we're going to show some examples today. So play with me here. And the first thing, I'm going to add a quote. And like every new language you learn, you write hello world. And you have a test button here, and you press test, and you see what is returned. So it actually returned the value, returned hello world, and you can see it was returned as a type string. Now, this is called implicit return. I could also write return world like that, and now it would know that I have to return hello world. You can see test returns hello world here because it has a return statement and a semicolon in the end. So that is one way to do that. Let's make it a bit more interesting. Let's add a variable called a, and we can say a equals something like hello, and another variable called b equals world, and now we can say variable c equals a plus b and semicolon, and we can return c, and you can imagine what that's going to return. Exactly the same without the space. I missed a space here, so let's put a space either to the beginning of world or after hello here, and we got the space back. So you can see that this playground lets us play. If I made a mistake and said return d, for example, you can, that variable d is not a variable that was declared here. If we test it, it also has the ability to.
Do you have a question, Amir, as I'm following along? I've missed semicolons periodically, and things seem to still work. Why is that?
So the nice thing with Arcade is very forgiving. So one thing is the implicit return. So if you didn't put return and you have one liner, it will just return the value. Another thing is that it's not case sensitive, right? So let's say I put my name Amir in. Amir is the hello, and we put here my name in mixed caps, and we fix this issue here. It's still going to work. So you don't have to worry about case sensitivity, and it's implicit. Many times I forget the semicolon, and it still works. It's a good practice to put it to declare where the line ends. Let's do another example, and let's just show you. In some languages, you have to say what type of variable you have. So I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to say var a equals, let's do 20. Var a equals 20, and variable b equals 21. And then we can put var c equals a plus b, and I'll let you think what return C will do before I press that. So maybe you're doing it yourselves, which is great.
2021.
Yep, relevant, right? So you can see that it didn't do the sum here because those are two strings. But let's remove the string by just putting the number and leave one as a string. Let's see if it fails now. One is a number and one is a string. No, it still figures that we're trying to add a number to a string and automatically casts it to a string. Pretty cool. But if we remove the string from both, now we get the result 41, and we can see that the type is now a number and not a string. So this is part one of the playground. Do we need some more time with that, or can we move on? Jason, Amy?
I'm good.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, so we saw the playground, we saw a demo, and let's talk about, we saw that we use the word var to declare a variable, and we saw that it's not case sensitive, so you can enjoy that. Sometimes there's a reserved word, usually it changed color, sound like pi is example, and in this case it's actually capital pi. We saw that we want to separate statements with semicolon to make it explicit. If possible, use return when you want to return a value. That could be sometimes in the middle of a condition, right? If so, return this, if else, return something else. So you can specify that. If it's just a single line, like for field calculation, I want to calculate one field value to another, you don't have to put return there. I didn't show you, but we want to usually add comments to make it meaningful for the future. So we add, is this a backslash or forward slash? But we had 2 of those. And
forward slash.
Forward slash.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jason.
Well,
2 forward slashes.
Some people will argue that too.
Especially those from Israel. So, no, I'm just kidding. So, there's another thing within Pro, another environment for arcade expression called the expression builder environment. And like you see here, and you get even better coloring from the playground. So you can see that by default, the reserved words change color, for example, and you also have the ability here to validate your expression. So it can tell you have an error on line 136, for example, and then you can just zoom there and figure that out. You can also use if statements and loops in arcade. So example here, if the feature stated area is smaller than 1, maybe it's 1 square meter or 1 square foot, return false. Otherwise, which will, for attribute rules, will mean this is an error. And if it's bigger than 1, return true. So you can provide kind of if logic, and that's very, very useful for many, many use cases, from labeling to attribute rules and other. And you can even have a loop. I never created a loop yet in arcade, but if you needed one, it has this capability. If you wanted to maybe loop through a certain set of features and aggregate their legal areas, for example, you could do that, for example. And we'll do a warm-up exercise now. Still in the playground, so you don't need just to keep the web browser. So we know that in Pro, we use 5 fields for Koga attribution. We usually ignore the last one. It's just for spiral curves. So we have the direction, distance, radius, and arc length. We know that for curves, there's many ways to define a curve, but we use only radius and arc length. That's how we store the information, right? As numeric values. Now, let's say somebody wanted to see a chord distance. So how do we convert those to chord? So the formula is 2 times the radius times sinus of arc length divided by 2 times the radius will give you the chord length. And then if you wanted the delta angle, it's simpler. You just divide the arc length with the radius. And if you want to see that in degrees and not in radians, you multiply that by 180 divided by pi. So in this exercise, and I'll start it for you guys, we are going to create a new variable to one time return the chord distance, and another time we'll return the delta angle. And if you have time, and because you're too fast, you can try to use the round command to return, let's say, only 2 decimal places for the chord distance. So let's go back to our arcade environment here, our playground, and I'm going to open my and we're going to, let's say the first thing we want to do is return the chord distance. So I'm just showing you how a comment is being used. I'm going to we're going to declare a variable. We're going to declare a variable called r for radius, and we're going to give it a distance of 1. That's called a unit circle, if you know, and that's going to be for radius. And another variable for the arc length, and you can call it arc length. I'm just going to call it AL to make it a bit shorter for myself, and we're going to give it a distance of 3.14159, and that's going to be the arc length. Okay, so now the first exercise for you to do is to return a chord distance. So I'm going to wait for a while for you to figure it out on yourself. And I'm going to give you back the formula here. So I'm going to switch and drag the formula so you can see it here. And if you wonder how to write sinus, it's just sine. It's exactly as it's written here, just S-I-N. And to multiply, it's a star, of course. So it's going well, Amy, Jason?
Yeah, I'm getting an error on the lines, on the expression line. Which the division symbol?
The division symbol now, in order to tell you, it's a forward slash.
Forward slash, or just a single forward slash?
A single one, yes. And
okay.
and put the sinus in parentheses, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know what I did wrong.
Good.
There it goes.
Okay. So I'm gonna copy paste from my cheat sheet, right? You can declare a chord, and it's 2 times the radius times sinus of the arc length divided by 2 times the radius. And if I press test, it's almost 2, which is what we expect. We gave it a chord. A circle has 2 pi r, right? If r is 1, so it's 2 times pi. And this is very close to 2. So that's 2 times the radius, right, is the chord in this case. And that's a number. Great. Now let's try to do the same for the delta. So I can just comment this out if you want to, and just declare a variable called delta. And if you remember, I'll let you do that a bit. Here's the formula. It's the arc length divided by the radius, and then converted to decimal degrees, 180 over pi. So
is there a trick for pi?
Yes, the trick is there is a trick for pi. Here's I'll show you the trick. It's just capital Pi. It doesn't change color in the playground, but in Pro it actually changes color, and you know that it works. So it's just capital P, capital I. In this case, I guess it is case sensitive, and you can see that it returned almost 180 degrees, half a circle. So we good on the playground on this exercise? Warm up?
Yep.
Okie dokie. So
I'm just slow.
Okay. No. So we'll wait a bit more, Amy.
Well, it's okay. Go on.
Okay. Go on. Okay. So we'll go on. And again, it's all recorded, so you can do it later. So the next thing I would like to show you, and this is how we started with Parcel, is use Arcade for labeling. But we're going to start from the playground. So let's start again with the playground. And we have this thing called the parcel number. Okay. So the parcel number is usually called, we'll create a new variable called name. And I'm going to give it a parcel number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you can give it your own format of parcel number. That's okay. And now we can create a variable called label. I'm just calling it label. It's not a real label. We are in the playground, but we will use it later. And we want to start parsing it to put hyphens between the numbers. So we can do something like left of name, the left 3 characters, right? And we want to add a hyphen. So let's add a hyphen here in quotes. So it's going to take the left 3 digits plus a hyphen. And let's put return label. So at any point here, you can always test and see how it looks. 1, 2, 3 dash. Okay. Now we want the middle 4, 5, 6. So let's add a plus and add now, instead of writing right or left, just mid for middle. And you can see it changes colors, right? When I press the D, it changes colors. Let me make it bigger. It changed the color, so now you can see that. And then we can put the name as well, but we need to specify, we want it to start from position 3 for 3 characters. And if we press the test button, sure enough, 456. And then if we want to have the right, it's just as simple as writing right, name. And now it's only 3 from the right. Test, but we forgot the hyphen. So let me add the hyphen again in the middle, plus right, test. So we managed to take a name field of 9 characters and put hyphens where we wanted to put them. And that's common with parcels, right? So we can do that.
I also tested out right now. Just to see if it worked. Obviously, with like Python and other coding languages, you kind of you don't want to have like really long lines where it just trails on with a bunch of commands. So if this got really long, you can just hit enter anywhere in the middle of that line and move it to the next line, and it'll
just
still work.
Like here.
Yeah,
like
and then
that.
you could even throw a tab on there so you can visually see that it's a line.
You don't have to have all those fancy indents and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, you can manually put in a tab there just so that you can see the indent, so you can say it's part of the top. Yeah, you don't need to worry about spaces.
Okay.
Cool, Jason. Now there's another box.
Be a little sloppy with this. It's kind of nice. It's forgiving.
Yeah. There's another button here on the right. It says profile, and we ignored it until now. It says default profile, but you can see some of the functional areas we talked about before. And we're going to switch, because it's labeling, and we're going to actually take this label to Pro soon. Let's switch to the labeling profile. And now we see something else here. We see a $feature.name field. And let's click on $feature.name and edit whatever it has. Let's look at it. And it has a string called value1. Let's change this value1 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the same thing we had before, and go back. And now we can copy $feature.name1, and instead of this string value, we can put it here. And let's test it. And you can see that it returns exactly the same value, right? So when we access features in Pro or web or mobile, we actually access them with this thing called $feature and then the name of the field. So in this case, the name of the field is called name1. In the parcel fabric, we call it name for parcels, for the polygons, right? And that should work. So let's now take this expression like it is now and go to ArcGIS Pro. And I'll open here an area with parcels. And I'm going to actually show you very basic. This is a parcel fabric, and maybe you don't have a parcel fabric, and that's okay. Here's a polygon class. I'm just going to right click and add it to a new map. So I'm going to close this. For now, we're going to get to these tables later. It was smart enough to know it's text parcels. I don't like that. Still smart enough. Okay. Why are you so smart today? What did I do? Okay. I'm going to go back and open another Pro session. I'm working, by the way, on unreleased versions of Pro, so it's expected. We can use this, but same data. Okay. So Here we have the tax parcels. I'm going to open another copy of this data. And this data is available publicly. We can share it, so we're not using someone's data. We see here the parcel number, right? I'm going to turn off the lines just so we can make it easier to see. And let's go to the labeling class. So under the select the layer, the parcel layer, go to the labeling class, and there's a few expressions here already. I'm going to create, now it's on partial. We can zoom in a bit. And let's make sure this doesn't draw and the full doesn't draw. If you have something there and the seed doesn't draw, and we're going to create a new class, complete the new one, and call it whatever you want, demo. So now there's no label class, and we're going to turn it on so it's does do something. That's the name field right now, and I think we're getting it from somewhere else. So we'll uncheck the box. Sorry, you have to uncheck this box. And so now it's not going to draw. It's only going to draw our demo class. So there's no labels. You can check it on, and it automatically goes to the name field. We're going to open that, and we're going to see that in the expression it says feature.name. So that's the example of we don't need a return here. And I'm just going to copy paste the expression we had in the playground. So in the playground it was called the field name1. Here it's called name, and we're just going to add that. And we can, in the expression builder, you see nicer colors, right? It's exactly as it was in the playground, and we can verify that it's working here and press apply. And you can see that it's working, right? This label is actually longer than what it is in the example we had. So you can adjust where to break it to your own needs. And now the next thing we'd like to do is maybe use some areas. Okay, so there's a field in the parcels called stated area. So let's try to return a label that also has the stated area. So let's add another variable called stated area. And this will be the $feature dot stated area. And this could be you have a different field, that's okay, you can use that. And we can also bring the area unit. Now we have a domain on the area units field, and look what happens when you double click on that. That's pretty cool. When you click on the stated area unit, it automatically puts a domain.
Could you possibly just go over just real quick how you got to this label thing? Because I think some people were a little bit lost in how you got to this window that you're currently in right now. So if you want to save that real fast. And
yeah, I'll close that. So my original meaning, user read only, was to actually, let's see if it's going to do it now. Come to the database, find a polygon class of a parcel, even in the fabric, like this one, and add it to a new map. And usually it comes without the parcel predefinitions, right? But as you see here, it came with a predefinition of, it was smart enough now, it's getting smarter and smarter to come with a predefined symbology. And actually, I wanted the vanilla symbology, like without any labeling, pick your, a random color. So what we had to do is corrupt the layer instead, and basically turn off the labeling classes that we are not interested in. So we went to those and just uncheck the partial, the full.
Yeah, so if you're using your data, the way that you got to this tab also is you have to click the on the table of contents, click the layer, and then on the top you'll see feature layer, click on the labeling tab. It's a contextual tab just to get there.
Yeah, so if I don't have any layer selected, I cannot get to the labeling tab, right? You have to select the layer, the parcel layer, in order to see the labeling tab appear, and then you get access to this area. And now that we created a new class for this demo, and we're only working in that area. So I want to bring two things. If I were to write just area here, instead of stated area, I would just write area. You see how the word area changes color? That is a big no-no. It tells you that this is a reserved word. We don't want to use it as a variable name. So we put the full name stated area. And then when we wanted to create another variable for the area unit, the area unit points to a domain. And when you double click that in the expression builder, it's smart enough to bring this command called domain name. So instead of seeing a code, it would actually, you would get the description of that code. Okay, so that's pretty neat. So that returns another string of the area unit. And then we can do something like the label is, let's say, only the right 4 digits. So it's going to be kind of the short form. Right.
Is that the correct syntax right there for the domain name, Amir, versus feature comma stated area unit, or is it feature dot stated area unit?
So this is the correct. So this is the name of the domain. So you give it the feature and the domain name, and
but which feature is that? It just says feature.
So it's always working on the current feature that, in this case, it knows it's the text polygons, right? And it looks for which field points to this domain.
Okay.
So it's smart enough to do that. I will show you what happens soon when we put feature dot stated area. We will get a code instead of an area. Okay. We'll experiment with that. So if we put label right name, we can put plus a space because we don't want and we can add the stated area. So we want to see the stated area. So we have a variable called stated area. So plus stated area and plus another space in brackets. And then we can put the area unit. And now let's verify that it's working and put apply. And we should see the results here. Yes, we see the last 4 digits plus the size and the area. If we were to put instead of this, we would just put $feature dot stated area unit instead of what we have now. We would get, instead of square foot, which is the string. Let's see if it's fine. There's an stated. I misspelled it. So we see how it helps this verification. Stated area unit. Now it should be fine. If we press apply now, instead of getting the string square foot, it gives me the code of that in the domain, which is 109.405. So that was how you convert a domain to the string value. So we did that, but it doesn't look so good. We want to probably go 1 line down. Another thing you can do is make it bigger. So we want the area to be 1 line down. So there's a command called text formatting dot new line. So when you write that, maybe I misspelled it, text formatting, there's too many T's. You can see it didn't change color. So that was an indication that something was wrong. And now that I spelled it right, it changed color. So that's great.
That's weird. I'm getting an error on the 3rd line there with the domain name. You don't know why. It says invalid expression on my end. Oh, I see why.
Okay.
We're good.
What was the?
There's an extra equal sign in there that should not have been there.
Okay. And this is where the verify helps, right? I mean, I caught my spelling mistake that way. So now we can see that the name of the parcel is on the top, and we jumped one line, and we get the area. But what if we wanted the name of the parcel to be bolded and more pronounced? So we can also use the formatting like this one, bold for bold. We have to put it in hyphens. So bold. These brackets, triangle brackets. So this will make it bold. So we just add this to make it bold, but we need also to tell it where to close it, right? So I'll just copy this one and put it after the name. And there's too many pluses here, or not. No, it's fine. But we need to close it with a closing / bracket, and we can verify it, and it's good. And we can apply it. And you can see now that the name of the parcel is bolded. So that's great. Should I slow down? Amy, am I running too fast?
It is pretty quick.
Okay.
It is pretty quick. It's fast, but luckily, this is recorded, so we at least have that.
Okay. Now, somebody might come and say, we use square foot for the small parcels, but if the parcel is half an acre or more, we want to use the acre sign on the parcel. Can Arcade help me that? And if we're a bit behind time, I'm just going to show you the logic, and I'm going to put it here. And so instead of returning this, we're going to check for the size of the parcel. So here's another nice command called if with double I, 2 times I. So IIF, what it does, you give it one condition, which is the legal area. In this case, I'm assuming I know it in square feet, bigger than half an acre, and half an acre is 21,780 square foot. Is it bigger? If it is bigger, do this. So you can see stated area divided by the acreage, which is there's 43,560 square foot in an acre. So divided by that to get to it in acres, and then round it to 2 decimal places, plus add the acre string to the label, right? This is the area label. Otherwise, do what you did before, which is just put the area plus the area unit that we had from before. And then return the label, which is the same as we had before, plus new line, plus the area label. So we just separated it and made it more explicit. Let's make sure that it's valid. It's okay, and then press apply. And we should see no difference now for the small parcels, but for the bigger parcels like this one, we see that it's now reporting area in acres because it was more than 21,780 square feet. So this is an example how you can manipulate the label expression to show area how you wish to see it. Now, what if the stated area is empty, for example, right? We assume that it has a value, which is fine, but let's look. There's a few places here that have no legal area. So we can look at the table and select them to find them quickly. Or not so quickly. Something is happening with my computer. Should have restarted it. So let's just sort it on stated area. And we can see that some parcels have no stated area. We can zoom to them. So in this case, we can see we just put the square foot next to it, but there's no area, right? So that wouldn't work nicely. We don't want to, if there's no square legal area, we don't want to show it. So how do we handle that? Well, we can just add another if condition to check if the stated area is empty or not. So I'm going to start accelerating it a bit. We can add an if command that checks for that. So for the area label, I'm going to take this away. Let's make some more space here. So there's a command that is really useful called isEmpty. So isEmpty will return true if a field is empty and false if it's not empty. In this case, we want the opposite. We want to ask, are you not empty? Do you have a value? So that's the reverse. And this little exclamation mark before the isEmpty does the reverse. So only if there's a value in the stated area field, then we do what we did exactly before and return a value. Otherwise, the area label will be empty. So if we apply that now, let's bring it down. Here we see this parcel here that has no legal area and press apply. For parcels that have no legal area, we will see only the number, right? So isEmpty is a really useful command, and never assume that all your fields are populated unless you're absolutely sure. It's always good to check if a field is empty before you assume something. And the other thing I wanted to show is how we can use Arcade for Symbology. So we have here some parcel. This is just a subset of data. And let's copy a layer. And we're going to paste it into this map. So I basically duplicated this layer, right? And we can rename it. I can give it a name. We are looking to find parcels with bad parcels with bad misclose ratio. So we rename this parcel. I can put it next to text so we know where it is. And we can click on it again. And now on the Appearance tab, there's a tab called Symbology, right? And we can press on, if we press on single value, they will all appear the same, right? But we actually want a unique value that we can control. And the way to control it is with this. Instead of pointing it to a field, one of the fields, use the name or whatever, you can create your own virtual field to return the value of interest. So you press this, again, expression builder in the Symbology pane. And what we are going to do now is to check how the misclose looks. And we're going to use the if statement. So I'm going to start with an if, and we're going to open a parenthesis, and we're going to put the $feature dot misclose ratio. That's the name of the field. Now, instead of typing it, I can just select it here and double click. So that's much safer. So let's look for the misclose ratio and double click it in here. So if the misclose ratio is bigger than 5001, let's say, sorry, it is smaller. So because it's a ratio and it's the reverse thing, you know that bad parcels are parcels that have a lower value. So if it's smaller than that, that's how we start the condition. Then we open curly brackets. We can move one line. We like to move 4 spaces to the right, and then we want to return bad misclose ratio. So some kind of a value. It could be anything, could be a number, but in this case, we're putting a string. So bad misclose ratio. And then we want to close the if statement. And of course, for all the other cases, we want to return that it's actually a good parcel. So we can use the same, but just write good misclose ratio. So we have 2 values. We change the bad to the good. And let's verify it. So if the misclose is bad, we return this. Otherwise, we return good. Let's check it. It's valid. If we press OK now, try to do that, everybody. You'll see that there's two values here, right? So that's one way to do it. But you can also say, I don't want to see the good ones. I just want to see the bad ones. So you can, if you don't want to see the good ones, you can just remove the return on the bottom and press OK. And then you only see the bad parcels. And you can decide if you want to see all other values or not. So let's say that we don't want to show all other values. So we really want to focus on the bad ones. And we'd like to show bad ones with a specific color. So we can go to the properties and give it a very bad color that sticks to the eye and apply. And we can close the Symbology pane. And very quickly, we can see all the parcels that have really bad misclose ratio in the map, right? And we have this custom expression. And the beauty is that we still have the labeling. So this is why on both feature classes, this is why you see them duplicated. But the nice thing with that is that you can define what a bad parcel means to you. You can have multiple layers, right? One for bad misclose, one for bad something else, missing area, and so on. And that is also valid. So go back to the slides. Do we want to spend some time to do that, Jason and Amy? To do a custom expression on the Symbology pane? It can be anything, right?
We could it probably would be a good idea to do that just so that it's in the video recording and people could follow along if they want to do that.
Okay. So it could be any field that you decide. You could decide that you don't want to see parcels that are too big or too small. Just practice with something for the sake of practice, return some value, and then symbolize it, and you have a layer that shows you that subset of data. Now we also, for reminder, we remove the show all other values, so we only see that type of parcels being returned. I might argue that you can also do that with a definition query, and that would be correct, but that uses SQL and might not be available on all clients, but I guess it will be available on other clients, but the difference is that with Arcade, you can have more business logic embedded there in a simpler way. So you don't have to know SQL queries, for example, and it's more straightforward. Okay, so Amy, you give me the signal.
For what?
To proceed.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Just, yeah, let's get this on the recording.
Okay. So, and then another way, if somebody wanted to do this, is to put the double IIF like we had before, and put the condition inside brackets like this, but then say if it's smaller, then it's bad. If the condition is true, then return bad. Otherwise, return, if you do want it to return two values, good. And that, if you do that, you can even omit the return because it's implicit, it's still valid, and you get the two values immediately. So that's another way to do it in one line to return two values. So I'll skip back to the slides. And we saw with labels that you can control the bolded text, but there's other things you can control. You can control the font size. So you can put same kind of brackets and declare which font size you want. So you can make the parcel name bigger, for example. You can even specify the font type. So maybe the parcel name is a different font than the area or whatever you want. And there's many more formatting text commands that I didn't show, and they're all documented, so you can underline and make things italic, and you can color things in different colors. British way, by the way, for the Brits underline. So you can do all of that. Another command we saw that is useful is the round command. So you can round values. That's especially good if you return distances and so on, or areas to the number of decimal places you want to see the value. Another one we saw is the command is empty, which is useful to check that things are not null and only applied for other nulls or whatever you choose to do. And another command, if you're checking for condition to do one and if not do the other, then the IIF is great for you because you can check the condition, result if true, result if false, and that's great.
Amir, one of the things that you can answer, one of the questions here says, can you do orientation also? So I'm assuming by this question they're asking if you can check orientation of features.
I guess, so is it orientation or is it orientation of annotation? If it's orientation of annotation, I think in annotation, the orientation is the field, right? So I assume you can just access that. If it's a bearing of a line, I think that's everybody knows that we have a field called direction. So maybe we need more clarification.
But if it's orientation of the text is the question.
So if it, yeah, so you could have so it depends what you're using. If you're using annotation or using labels. If you're using labels and you're using a field on the feature class to rotate the label, which is possible, then you can access that value and even update it and so on. So that's one way. If you're using anno, I think you can also access the rotation of an annotation on the field, but I haven't played with that. So we saw this example here, and that's very powerful because instead of using specific field, you can use whatever mix of fields you want or combinations or values you want to return, right? You can put a logic in here. So you might, so that gives you a lot of power. And throughout the thing, we use the global called feature. So I want to introduce you to a concept of called global. And globals are things that have the dollar sign in front of them in general. And with that global kind of a JSON question, which feature am I being evaluated? Well, it's the current feature. Every parcel gets its own label. So for each parcel, the dollar feature is itself. We'll look at other data types. So we see that there's non-GIS data types. You can see there's a thing called array that looks like array, a Boolean, which can create a true or false. There's a date. You can specify a date, for example, which is today. You can have a dictionary, which kind of have basically two values, and then you can use a code to bring the other value. There's you can create a number using the number, my num, and there's a way to create. There's of course text, and they were pretty implicit. We didn't have to say variable string or variable string. That it just figured it out by itself, and the way we wrote it. And then there's also GIS data types in Arcade, and that gives, of course, combining the two gives a lot of power. We worked a lot with the feature, and the other one that will probably work soon is the feature set and the geometry. Okay, so let's wait for that. And I want to show you some field calculation and geoprocessing, which also has an Arcade builder, and the other one, and some things we'll do on the other data as well. So let me go to, where is that one? Not this one, not this one, this one. So in data migration to the parcel fabrics, one of the steps is to create a GP, is to create parcel records, right? And that actually came from Frank on the RD's website that submitted an idea. And one of the tools is we use is the tool to create parcel records. So we can specify the parcels which are here and which field we want to specify, but then we are limited to one field by which we can create the record, right? Which means that if we need a combination of fields, we need to add a new field and do calculation, then use that field and then delete that field again. Instead, we can specify now, instead of a field, an expression. So GP Tools is another profile, can take expressions in. And now we can specify a combination of fields. In this case, it's the municipality. It's Dutch data, public data. So we're just going to combine the municipality with the section code, and we can press run, and it will create records based on that. And you can do the same, creating using, for example, book and page or subdivision name and so on. So a combination. So this is another example of another area where ArcGIS is being used in the geoprocessing frameworks, and you can use it also to accelerate and make data migration to the fabric even easier. And now that it's going to be done, we can close the attribute table, and we can see the blue outlines of those records, and we should see a label coming soon, and you can see those small labels. And if we look now in the record table, we can see that the name of the record is actually this combination. So you can see that code, and the section code is the last letter here. And with the parcel fabric, you also get the count of how many parcels are associated to each of those parcels. So you can see that's quite a few in this sample data that we ran on. It's an entire city in the Netherlands. So that was one example. And another example I wanted to show is field calculation. So let's go back to this data that we saw before, and we're going to open the attribute table for parcels. And I think I added a few fields in here just to make a point. Yeah, there's a needs research field here that we can see. And remember, so let's say you want to define which parcels need some additional TLC and research. So you can just basically do a field calculation and use an arcade expression for some criteria. So it's going to populate all those values. And instead of using Python here, we can switch to arcade. And now we get the expression builder here. I can expand it and make it a bit bigger. And I'm going to just paste exactly very similar expression we had before. If the misload ratio is, in this case, really bad, under 1,000, return 1, kind of a flag. Is it okay? Yes, apply. And it's going to apply it to all the parcels here. If it's 0, then it's okay. If it's 1, it needs research. And because it's pointing to the domain, yes, no, you can see which one needs to do some more research and which one do not. Another example, area mismatch, which is common, is let's find the delta in area between the legal area and the shape area. Okay, so I'll go over the script, and all of those examples you can maybe at home later just do it yourself. So we're running out of time a bit, so we're going to accelerate a bit. So let's see what's going on here. So we can see that we initialize the delta area as 0. We make sure that the stated area is populated. We only want to check features that have stated area. We don't want to report the difference between null and something. And then the shape area, we use an area command. And the area command also has, you can specify which unit you want the area to return in. And the stated area, of course, is just the value of the field. The delta is the absolute value. And you can see the reserved words change color, right, of the difference, and return the delta area. And if we press OK, it's going to run this expression. And we're going to see all the parcels that have a mismatch in area between the legal and the stated. We can also use the expression in Symbology if we want to try to to, for example, return parcels that have a mismatch beyond a certain percentage and only symbolize those, so we can focus on those and understand why they have such a big difference. Maybe either somebody typed the legal area wrong or the geometry is wrong, for example. So it's running. And we can see that some of those parcels have 0, which means there was no legal area because it was null. But if we sort it descending, we'll see some parcels that have big differences between the legal and the non-legal. So that was another example. Here we can see, oh, one has a really big difference. So worth looking at. Maybe I corrupted it myself. So that was another example. And if there's any question, guys, just put it on the chat box and we'll try to reply to them now or later if we have time. So we saw globals, and another way to find which globals are available for you with every profile is in that playground environment. When you switch to a certain profile, you'll see the globals that are available to you in that environment, right? So in the field calculator, you can use something called data store, and you can access the data this way. And for labeling, you might have the map or pop-ups. So that's another way to show which globals are available. And just be aware that different globals are available for different profiles. And that's something worth remembering. And these are some of the examples of globals that are very common. So data store is what gives you access to the table, and you can use a SQL query on that using the filter command. View scale is something that gives you access to the scale of a specific map in a certain moment. So that could be useful for labeling or annotation. And fit and map, for example, is useful and there when you are in the map, so it's useful for pop-ups and labels. Now, there's a lot of arcade functions and they keep growing every release. So I even found, and the documentation just keeps improving every time. So here's an example for a command that checks if there's overlap between two geometries. So you can, for example, find parcels that are overlapping and should not overlap. And it's fully documented and even shows you what the relationship between the geometries and types can be. And you can just scroll through all of those functions or just search for them. Pretty easy to navigate to and read and also get examples. But sometimes there's not enough reference, and I'll show you some tips later how you find more examples. The dollar feature we used is really useful to work against a single feature, the current feature that you're working on. But sometimes you want to work against multiple features. And for that, there's a thing called a feature set. When you say a feature set, you mean a collection of features. It could be sometimes that feature set is empty or has only one feature, right? So if I do a SQL query to find the record that has a specific global ID, it will return me a type of a feature set, but that feature type is expected only to have one feature. And it's part of data functions, and there's different functions that return feature sets. I put the one that we use a lot. There's feature set by ID. That's useful when you're working on the web to with a specific map to provide an ID of that map and ID of that layer, I think, and then which fields do you want to see? Do you want to include the geometry, and you get the feature set. But this only works against published maps. If you want to see a table by name, then you have the feature set by name, so you can specify a specific table name and then use either map or data store here. There's a feature set by relationship name, and that's useful, we'll see soon, to get the record name. And there's also the filter, which allows you to put SQL queries on tables. So think about it as basically kind of a table that you get back. So The next thing I want to show is how we can use Arcade in Popups, which is also great. And let me scroll to my cheat sheet. So here we see a parcel, and when we click on a parcel, we get a pop-up. And the pop-up usually includes all the fields in that parcel, right? But let's say we want to also show the record name that is associated to the created by record. That global ID is really not very useful. How do we configure the pop-up? So I don't want to see the global ID of the record, I just want to see the record name. So let's go to the text layer, right click on it, and go to configure pop-ups. And underneath here, there's expression. So Amy, Jason, I want to go slow on this one just so everybody has it. And so I'll do it slowly, okay?
All right.
Perfect.
Okay, so pops up, yeah, I'm sure people will go wild with this too, and it's very useful with the pop-up. So right click on a layer, and then I just clicked on configure pop-ups, right? It was here in the middle. And you'll have that open. And then on the bottom, you see a button called expression. So we'll click on that to create an arcade expression. And there's nothing here, so we'll create one that is new. And I'll give it a name called record name. And I think the name should not have any spaces, but the title can have a space. So we'll put a space in record name. And now we'll use a feature set to get the record name. So this table is called tags, and it has a relationship name. It has a relationship class between the text parcels to the records table. And that is called record has, in this case, tags. So I know the name of the relationship, so I can use it to my advantage. So we can use feature, let me make it bigger so everybody can see. Okay. So there's a command called feature set by relationship name. So it's a bit long, but we can make it feature set by relationship name. And I know I'm right because it changed color. So this is the one we're going to use. And we're going to use it on the specific feature we want. So again, Mr. Dollar feature comes to play. We want to apply it to the feature we have. Now, the next thing is to provide it with a relationship name. And this will be different for every data set. So if your table is called tags, then it will be by default record has tags. If it's something else, you will change the last 3 characters here to whatever makes sense, your parcel type name, basically. Now, the next thing after that to put is the fields we want to retrieve from that other table, the record table. In this case, we only want the name of the record. So we're going to open a square brackets and just put the value name in there and close the square brackets. We can put multiple fields here if we choose to do so. And then once we do that, we put another comma, and this is important for other use cases. Do you want to get the geometry back or not? In this case, we don't need the record geometry, so we are going to put false. And that there's no, it's going to cause, of course, more performance if we return all the geometries. So it's good not to return them if you don't need them. And we can close that, and this will give us back all the records for this feature, because it's a relationship class. Potentially, it could return multiple, right? Because of that, we only want the first one. There is only one, but we have to say it. So we put the command first in the beginning and add another parenthesis on both sides. So this gives me the first record in that list, and that record has one value called field, and it doesn't have any geometry, and that's a feature set, right? So it still doesn't have a name. So we can give it a variable, or we can just return it. If we want the name field, we have to say, okay, in this record, we want the name field. So we have to put a dot name in there in the end. We can do it in 2 stages too. I can declare a variable and then do it on the variable. And if we want to return that, we can put a return, or it's just implicit, and we can say, okay, semicolon is always a good practice. It's already valid. And let's see what happens now when we press on a parcel. So we have a new expression here. I'm going to just press on a parcel, and sure enough, it returns a thing called record name. You can see here, and it has the record name in there. Okay, we can also, of course, navigate the relationship class in the pop-up, and we can see that it did the right thing. Okay, so this was a common request. I know people don't want to see global IDs, want to see the record. Here's how you do it. You have to do it separately on every table because it uses the relationship class name, which will be different for different tables. Are we good, guys?
It worked for me.
Awesome. Awesome sauce. Awesome sauce. Okay, I have more examples that we are not going to cover today, but we're going to supply them with examples, and you can calculate the delta area. I think we did that one. Delta distance, also useful if you want to compare distance between the coordinates of XY coordinates to the shape geometry to make sure they make sense. We just did this one. I think I skipped some slides, but we'll get them. Geometry is another function we didn't get into, but it lets you either calculate the area. It can let you give you access to the X, Y, Z coordinates of a point. You can even compare 2 geometries if they are equal to each other. You can give it other operators. We saw overlap. There's intersect. Within is one feature within the other, and so on. And we'll see with attribute rules in the next meetup that you can even use them to update geometry. So it's powerful stuff. This is the next meetup, like we said. And we also want to mention we have a guest presenter, John McDowell from Clackamas, I cannot pronounce this, from the ORMAP group, Oregon Mapping Group. How do you say it, Amy?
Clackamas.
Clackamas County. Thank you, Oregon. So he'll show us what he's been doing with attribute rules, and that's going to be exciting. Jason, I don't know if you know that, but you have also a role in this meetup to ask poll questions, and then we're going to go into tips and resources. So I know I didn't prepare you for that.
I did not know this role. That is fine. I can make do.
I need to stop presenting, right? Or not?
Poll questions. No.
Okay.
We'll see. I'm going to hit launch here, see what happens, see if people see this. Did something pop up on your screen, Amy?
Yes.
Or do you still see Amy's on your screen? Okay, so
no, I
see people voting already. See the poll question, perfect. So the first question is, does this introduction to Arcade session meet your expectations? And we've got yes, no, or somewhat. Okay, keeping an eye here. So we got about 50% of the voting coming in here. All right, so I'll go ahead and close this and share the results with everybody. So it looks like 91% said yes. This introduction to Arcade session met your expectations. And yeah, it might have gone a little bit fast, but don't worry, we will this recording will be up online. You'll be able to follow along and pause and take it at your own pace.
And
next poll question.
And I just have a question. Will the slides be available so we can
Yeah, so the same place where the video will be, I'll post the slides and also the cheat sheet.
Perfect.
With all the answers.
Awesome. You can look in the back of the book for the
Next
answers, right?
Next question is, do you like this hands-on self-exercise format? Yeah, yes or no? And yeah, I think this is also pretty cool, just because even if it is fast, you can take it back and do it at your own pace at a later time too, and it's actually pretty fun to go through these exercises. Looks like we've got 98% of the votes saying yes, that they like this approach.
So we might use that approach in other areas, right? To other things we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question, how did you find the content level? Please select one. Was this too easy for the beginners? I think that's spelled wrong, but just right level, and too hard for beginners. It looks like it's correctly spelled there. So
I'm sure it's too easy for people that already do arcade. This is why I put beginners there. So even if you're a proficient with arcade, think about beginners, I guess, about your first steps.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
All right, cool. So it looks like the majority of the people felt this was just the right level. Some people found it a little bit too difficult, but yeah, just kind of keep at it. Take a look at the documentation. Play around with that that playground online. That's a really great place to learn arcade and follow along with these steps if you go back and rewatch the video. All right, next question. We've got two more here. Do you plan to use arcade expressions in your job? So do you expect to use these for any of the things that you've seen today, like pop-ups or labeled expressions or doing field calculations?
And of course, attribute rules, but we skip those because we're going to dive we're going to focus on those in the next meetup.
All right, so it looks like we have a unanimous vote here. Everybody.
Something is wrong.
People polled.
With land records and cadastre, that's strange.
Mm-hmm.
The elections are rigged probably. Okay.
Where do you see your organization using arcade? Oh, it's actually, so for all the y'all that said yes, go ahead and just select all that apply on this one. Where do you guys see yourself using arcade expressions?
Yeah. And I think I can only put 5 values here, so I put other for the last one.
Amira, also when you put the I don't know if you said this a little bit ago, but when you put the slides and the video up online, do you think you'd be able to put that little small set of data online?
Yes. Yeah, I can.
Just the polygons or whatever, so that people can utilize that as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And that was also requested in the questions in the comments.
Cool.
All right, cool. So this one's going to be quite a mixed bag here. It looks like the majority of the people will be using this for labeling, followed by pop-ups and symbology, and then attribute rules, and then other profiles at 29%.
Cool.
So
okay.
That concludes the poll questions. So back to you, Amir.
Thanks, Jason. So some tips. The first tip is search. Just Google it or Bing it or whatever search engine you use, and you'll usually get the right documentation / other people with the same question many times with the answer. So that's number one. The second thing is think about performance. I've done some bad things to tell you that think about that. If you access a single feature, it's fast. It's looking at that feature, it has access to its attributes, it calculates whatever it needs to do, and it's very fast, low risk. But if you're now using something like filter that uses a SQL query, if you have a table that has 1 million records or 10 million, and you're putting a SQL query that might be expensive, that means that every time you do something, depending if it's a label or an attribute rule or whatever, it's going to hit that SQL query, and it's going to potentially take some time. So either put a very efficient SQL query here, or think about it, there's a risk involved. And it's more risky because sometimes the user is not aware that it's running, right? It could be an attribute rule that calculates the value, and they don't even know that it's running. So think about it. And of course, there's a solution. You can defer those attribute rules to a batch calculation at a later time if it's an expensive one. Another thing to be worried about is spatial operators. The more you use them, if you union the whole record, I've done bad things with that too. So If you do too much, again, you get performance hits. So if you do something simple, then usually it's fine. Another thing that I noted, if you use a small expression of a few lines, the expression editor in Pro Playground is perfect. But if it's getting very big, then it's not the very ideal environment. Sometimes I use Notepad++ and point it to JavaScript as a language and use that and then copy paste into the expression editor. So that kind of helps me a bit. Another thing, especially if you're a true developer, you'll find it hard to debug. You cannot just hover over a variable and see the value change or so on. And I found that many times copy pasting the expression into the playground helps to find where it suffers from problems. Another thing that can help is to put it in pop-ups because it's very immediate compared to attribute rules. You see the value being returned, whether it's true or false and so on. And once you get the right behavior, you can move that logic to wherever it needs to live. Sometimes it involves more steps to, for example, with attribute rules, you have to save it into the schema first. So that's an easier way to validate that. Just be aware that different profiles between the different environments might cause your expression not to work there. So just, we'll talk about that in the next session. If you have more verbose scripting, then when you get an error, it tells you exactly which line is the problem, right? So it's less, if you put too much code in one big line, then when something goes wrong, you have to decipher that entire line. If you split it to multiple lines, sometimes it makes it easier. Put comments so you know what you did for later, and cheat. So especially when you Google, you'll find other people doing the same thing. So use those as reference and tweak it to make it work for you. And when you have something working that is useful for others, please post it on as a blog, maybe in the Parcel Fabric place on GeoNet so others can use. Another thing, if you open the Kogo labeling, you'll find that it's very big right now. Actually, the arcade team is working on having those field formatting from quadrant bearing, north azimuth, DMS, and so on, part of the arcade language. So that's going to come in the future. This is why we have methods there, for example, to convert a bearing, in this case, from decimal degrees to degrees, minutes, seconds, right? It does it here. And another one to create quadrant bearings and so on. And because this might be used multiple times, you can even write it as a function. So if you have something in your organization that's going to be reused multiple times, maybe it's the formatting of your parcel number, or I don't know what, you can write a function for that. And then during the script, you can just call that function called, in this case, DMS, give it the value, and you get back nice formatted whatever it is you want to see back. The community, Hussein is actually the product owner for attribute rules and contributes a lot of great blogs out there and scripts that you can use as reference. Another person actually works for a distributor in Colombia. I don't know what he's doing, but he's Dutch, but he moved to Colombia and he responds to most of the questions in arcade out there, and really great expert in arcade. And there's many more. So just post your questions in the right place with the right tags, and you'll see people from the community usually respond to that pretty quickly. There's no place, I didn't find this place for arcade as a place, but because it's used across the platform. So post it in the right context. If it's labeling, and labeling, symbology, and symbology, etc., etc. The search in the new GeoNet is greatly improved. So use that as well, and you can follow those experts. Sorry. Another more resources are in these links, and these slides will be shared so you can be able to click on them. There's actually tutorials to get started. There's also blogs that are useful and all in one place. There's a book. There's, if you work with web maps, there's a lot of resources that people from the online team put together. Those are mostly about symbology and pop-ups. And there's also a great collection of YouTube videos about arcade. So they're all here. There's even someone that wrote a book about it that you can use. And from today, also this video will be part of the resources. So I guess this is it. We're almost on time. If there's some questions to answer, maybe that's a good time. Anything else that pops out there in the chat box? A question? No. So I hope to see you all in 2 weeks about attribute rules. And thank you for joining the first 2021 meetup.
Yeah, thank you, Amir. That was awesome.
Thank you,
That was,
Jason
and
and Amy, for helping
it was
me.
fun to, yeah, no, it was fun to do the playground and do it while you were, yeah, I like the hands-on.
Hopefully in the future we can sit closer to each other, Amy, and I can see when you are done.
Nice.
Okay, thank you guys. Stop recording.